our stage our Illinois Teacher of the Year, Lindsey Jensen.
My name is Lindsey Jensen, and I am a proud public school teacher at Dwight Township High School. And it has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as the 2018 Illinois Teacher of the Year. Tonight is about celebrating all that is good in Illinois education, and man, isn't there a lot of incredible work being done. At this time, could I please ask every teacher, current or retired, to please stand. All of my brothers and sisters in Illinois education, if you are a teacher, please stand. Can we please give these individuals a loud, overwhelming, emotional round of Thank you. So what does it mean to be the Illinois Teacher of the Year? To borrow the words of my incredible mentor, Steve Elza, it does not mean that I'm the best teacher in the state. It does not mean that I'm the best teacher in this room. It does not mean that I'm the best teacher in my district, and it does not mean that I'm the best teacher in my building at Dwight Township High School. Sorry, I got nervous. What I've discovered it does mean is that I am fiercely and unapologetically passionate about education and about fighting for quality education for all kids. It also means that I get the opportunity to travel the state and to witness firsthand all of the inspiring things that are happening in classrooms throughout Illinois. Things that are happening in the classrooms of educators such as Jim Connolly, an automotive technology teacher at Morton West High School, who draws upon his own experiences as a student to help him be the best teacher he can be. Educators such as Teresa Eden, a Title I reading teacher at Monroe Center Grade School, who takes each academic relationship with a student and makes it personal by mentoring, guiding, and teaching every student to reach for the stars. Educators such as Bill Farmer, a biology and chemistry teacher at Evanston Township High School, who originally pursued a career in the medical field, but who realized during his sophomore year in college that he was becoming a passive recipient of science information rather than an active participant in his learning, and who decided that his real calling was not to become a doctor, but to become a teacher. Educators like Erin Miller, a fourth grade teacher at Brimfield Grade School, whose ability to engage students at all learning levels, coupled with her enthusiasm for teaching and learning, makes her an excellent role model to her fellow teachers and her students. Educators such as Jamie Nash Mayberry, who teaches social studies at Shawnee High School, who volunteers to work with individuals with disabilities to develop greater compassion and patience. Educators such as Angie Noble, who teaches third grade at Jerseyville East Elementary School, who says she knew from an early age that she was meant to be a teacher. Educators like Faith Skinner, who teaches math to sixth graders at Emily G. John School, who admits that she didn't teach for very long before she realized that she needed to learn the things they didn't teach in college if she wanted to be a successful teacher, and who educated herself about the lives of students living in poverty to become more understanding and empathetic. Educators like Morgan Teskey, a special education teacher at East High School in Rockford, who initially had no idea what type of career he wanted to pursue, but who had an opportunity to be a full-time sub for students with behavioral and emotional challenges, one which gave them a whole new perspective and a whole new career. And educators such as Valerie Berger, who teaches family and consumer science at West Layton High School, and who has single-handedly implemented a program which allows her students to obtain their food handling license and food service sanitation manager certification in high school. These are just a few of the incredible educators and fellow 2018 Top 10 Illinois Teachers of the Year whom I'm fortunate enough to call my brothers and sisters in Illinois education. In all honesty, I'm not doing anything that all the fabulous educators in this room aren't doing. I'm building relationships with kids and their families, and I'm capitalizing on opportunities to engage with my community to create meaningful learning experiences for my students. I was reminded at this time last year about the power of the seemingly insignificant moments in our careers. Along with some letters from students and colleagues, the man in the top left nominated me for Illinois Teacher of the Year. His name is Tim Henson, and he is our Chief of Police in Dwight, Illinois. And it's incredibly ironic that he nominated me for an award because I don't know anyone who does more for the community of Dwight than Tim Henson. Nevertheless, it was a partnership between my students and our local police department and our polar plunging advocacy work for Special Olympics that led to my nomination. And from that nomination, my life has changed forever. My year began with a trip to California where I was fortunate enough to visit all of the Google campuses with my Teacher of the Year brothers and sisters from across the country. I even got to spend some time with the guy in the upper left corner photo. His name is Sal Khan, and he is the creator of Khan Academy. Perhaps you've heard of it. Then came my first of a few trips to Washington, D.C., where we visited the White House by simply walking in the front door. We met the president. We even had lunch with Karen Pence and the vice president at their residence, and we visited the Smithsonian before opening hours. While at the White House, I got to sit second row center as my dear friend, Mandy Manning, a Washington State educator who teaches refugee and immigrant students at the Newcomer Center, was named the National Teacher of the Year. It was a truly remarkable week where I grew in my advocacy efforts for education. Now, quick question. How many of you have experienced this? Someone who's never been at the front of a classroom, they try to tell you what's wrong with education, and they list all of the ways that classrooms should be run. Can you relate to this? It's frustrating, isn't it? So that basically summarizes my meeting at the Department of Education. Now, ever the optimist, I will choose to reflect on the positives from that experience, being that she was very gracious with her time. While there, I explained that there is no one better positioned to contribute to policy-making decisions regarding children and education than teachers. And I asked her what she planned to do to ensure that teachers have a seat at the proverbial table. I'll summarize the experience by saying that we didn't agree on, well, anything. But I was grateful to have the platform to express some of my concerns as an educator, and in the spirit of being diplomatic, that's all I have to say about that. But you know what? When I left Washington, D.C., I was quite deflated. I became obsessed with educating myself about the difference between equality and equity, as well as about educating myself about the inequities within education. And I became overwhelmed and depressed, which anyone who knows me would say is rather unusual. But what I eventually realized is that there was nothing wrong with me at all. I was simply now paying attention to the things that were happening in education beyond the four walls of my classroom. And this awareness brought with it a renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of passion, and a renewed sense of principle. And this revelation couldn't have come at a better time because shortly after, I jetted off to Vegas for the National Network of State Teachers of the Year conference, where I was surrounded by some of the most inspiring teacher leaders in the country. I left feeling empowered and hopeful about the future of education, and I realized just how mighty our collective voice is as a profession. Thankfully, my summer wrapped with a bit of fun when I went to space camp with my Teacher of the Year brothers and sisters, and this English teacher was reminded of what it's like to feel uncomfortable and challenged within the classroom. Nevertheless, I found my groove, and you will not convince me that I am not an astronaut after this experience, and I have the flight suit to prove it. Fortunately, I have found my voice this year. And that is my hope for all of you. that you recognize the power that we hold within our classrooms, and that you recognize just how much our students need us at this moment. That you're brave enough to step outside of the four walls of your own classrooms and to advocate for our kids and for education, which is the very foundation of our democracy. If you had told me last year that I, a chronic apologizer and a recovering people pleaser, would have the courage to speak my mind at the Department of Ed, I would have laughed in your face. But I've learned that our students need us in this fight, and I cannot think of a more important reason to get uncomfortable and to take some personal risks. So what's next for me? I'm actually still figuring that out, but one thing is certain. This is my happy place. I'm still in my classroom at Dwight Township High School, and I hope to take on a few passion projects that I hope will impact teacher recruitment in our state. I feel so incredibly lucky to be surrounded by my incredible colleagues, any one of whom could be Teacher of the Year. There's no way I could have ever survived this year in my classroom teaching AP English, English 4, and English 3, while simultaneously serving as the Illinois Teacher of the Year without my amazing colleagues at Dwight Public Schools. So I want to publicly thank them for all that they've done to support me this year. Everyone always asks, so what's life like after Teacher of the Year? Are you going back to your classroom? To which I respond, I'm going forward to my classroom. I hope to continue my advocacy work by speaking regularly and building on some of the relationships that I've made this year. I believe that to whom much is given, much is expected. And the Illinois Teacher of the Year is gifted with a life-changing opportunity to advocate for kids. And I promise that I will not squander this gift that I have been given. As for what I've learned this year, I've learned that there is no shortage of incredible rock star educators in this country. They're simply stuck within a system that, quite frankly, needs some work. As a result, we have to stop looking at things as they are and start imagining them as they could be. No problems within education can be solved from the same level of consciousness which created them. This means that we have some work to do and that we have to get uncomfortable. Now, the interesting part is often when asked, who wants change? We typically see a ton of eager hands in the air, but when we ask who is willing to change, who is willing to step outside of their comfort zones to ensure that all students receive the high-quality education that they all deserve, the response is less overwhelming. So as we celebrate all of the great things that are happening in Illinois education tonight, I ask that tomorrow we reflect on what we can do to improve the status quo. The number one thing I've learned this year is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. But the good news is that educators are finding their voices and are fighting for a seat at the proverbial table. When else have teachers been at the forefront of national discourse? I have a lot of people who say to me sarcastically, wow, what a time to be Illinois Teacher of the Year, to which I respond, you're right. What an empowering time to be Teacher of the Year, but most importantly, what an empowering time to be a teacher. I've watched as our brothers and sisters in Oklahoma and West Virginia and Kentucky and Arizona have fought for better conditions, not only for themselves, but for their precious students. So, to whoever's name is called at the end of the evening tonight, I ask that as an ambassador for Illinois teachers, that you continue to lead this empowering charge, because a child's future should not be determined by their zip codes, but instead by their dreams and aspirations. And this goes for all students, regardless of race, class, creed, religion, or sexual orientation. My friends, don't ever let anyone make you feel like the work that you're doing in your classrooms doesn't matter. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like this isn't the most noble of noble professions because it is the best job in the world. When I get down and depressed about what sometimes feels like an uphill battle, I reflect back on the beginning of my year. While on my flight home from my week at Google, I was seated next to a woman who looked very successful, and we struck up a brief conversation, and eventually she asked what I did for a living. And when I responded with pride, well, I teach high school English, her expression changed. And I remember her reaction, which was this: "You teach high school? Oh, I could never teach teenage brats all day. And I would never subject myself to that kind of abuse. It takes a very special person to be a teacher." The way the word teacher escaped her lips signified that she did not intend for her words to be taken as a compliment. And she's right. It certainly does take someone very special to be a teacher. Nevertheless, it was on that plane ride home after this brief exchange, when I was incredibly homesick and missing my students in a way that I have never experienced before, that I wrote the following poem, and it's called Aches on a Plane. "You teach high school," she quips as she turns up her nose. "You bet," I respond. "They're the ones that I chose. But they're jaded and awful. You must be insane. They use cuss words, hate school. They're incredibly vain. They're unruly, conceited. They think school is lame. If you tell them to write, they will grimace in pain. They sing songs that are stupid, I mean Gucci Mane. And they can't get along, enter class with disdain. Apathetic and lazy, they cannot be tamed. Teaching high school, my dear, tell me, what do you gain?" So I take a deep breath, and I smile with grace, resisting the urge to slap her square in the face. It's a combo I know all too well, I must say, though the face of my critic shifts from day to day. See, it's not about me, I quickly insist. And the truth is, I actually love high school kids. See, there's Bubba the Brave, he's enlisting in June. And Lucy's a singer, she's always in tune. There's Josh, the artist, he paints pretty pics. There are wrestlers and cheerleaders and self-proclaimed hicks. And Jimmy and Abby, they act on the stage. And Faith is a reader, consuming each page. There's Brooklyn, a leader, she's happy and kind. And someday, on Brandon's cuisine, I will dine. There's Morgan the golfer, she just might go pro. They use silly expressions like, "Hey, what's up, bro?" They are funny and witty and changing the world, and I desperately love every sweet boy and girl. So, to answer your question, just what do I gain? The answer is simple. I gain everything. For all that they do to advocate for education in Illinois. I want to thank Anne and her incredible team for devoting so much time and effort into creating this banquet which celebrates all that is good in Illinois education. And I want to thank all of my Illinois Teacher of the Year, brothers and sisters, who have served as incredible role models and mentors to me throughout this year. I want to thank my students and their families for their unwavering support. I want to thank my own family for encouraging me throughout this year. And I want to thank my husband, who hates public attention of any kind, who is undoubtedly mortified right now, for always being my biggest cheerleader. On the days when I convince myself that I can't change the world, you consistently remind me that I can, and I love you. And I promise I will. In closing, I believe there's nothing wrong in education that cannot be fixed by what is right in education. And all of you are a testament to what is right in education. Keep being the rock stars that I know you are. And most importantly, keep raising your voices for kids and for education in the state of Illinois. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you.